Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here today. Adweek Europe, especially in fact in person, human beings, it makes a real change. Couple of things for us. First things to say is that there's going to be some polls in the session. So if you would like to take part in the poll, and we'd really love you to do that because we'd love your thoughts and opinions, is scan the QR code because it's an important aspect of that. My name's Peter Bates. I'm head of brand and marketing for Europe, Middle East and Africa for the global bank Citi. I just want to say thank you for those who are attending both in the room and on the stream, because I think you'll all agree this is an important subject for us to discuss. The goal of today is to introduce you to the work that we've been doing with Getty. We've been working on a diversity, equality and inclusion imagery toolkit. And I think basically for us, the idea is that this gives you the opportunity to have an understanding of the work we've been doing. The aim was to take a deep dive into the world of imagery and to understand how the subject of diversity changes dependent upon the markets. It was a multi-market project that we ran across most of the major markets within our business. And it explores a lot of the nuances when it comes to DE&I. And for us, it was about us understanding how we can embed the knowledge that we got from this into the work that we do and into the creative projects that we run. But also, and equally as important, it was about how do we take what we've learned and share it with the industry. And really this is part of what this is about and these sessions that we're running. Why do we choose to work with Getty? Well, it's obvious, because Getty are the market leading image library, both for stock and also for custom imagery. And they seem to be obviously the most appropriate partner. I'm delighted to be joined on the stage by Dr. Rebecca Swift from Getty. And she's going to be taking you through a bit of the presentation, which is really a sort of a snapshot of the work that we're doing. The idea is this just equips you with sort of tangible ways of working and tangible ways of understanding how, when it comes to image selection, you can ask the right questions. Okay. How did it come about? Well, for us, we're a global team. And what we were seeing as we were assessing work that was coming in from around the regions was that some of the work, the way we express diversity changed. And we needed to better understand that so we could evaluate work at a global level. We saw a universal opportunity to better understand this. So we partnered with Getty and also with the global research firm Kantar to do a really deep dive. And that deep dive covered things like population demographics. It covered trends in imagery. It covered areas of diversity that are often missed within imagery, and also the subjects of stereotypes and cliché. Since we developed the toolkits, we've been doing internal programs where we're sharing the data, sharing with our colleagues. And for us, the next step is to share that with everybody else. And we've been running sessions externally from the organisation. I think we launched the US one at Adweek US. And after that, and listed on the presentation there, is all of the other markets. So far we've got the US, UK and Mexico, but there's going to be additional 8 markets that we're going to produce the work, and that's going to be done this year. What I would say is on here is another QR code and a link, freely available for everyone to download and access. So I'd encourage you to get the link or take a picture of the QR code and access them, and as they become available, they'll appear on that site. Okay, so before we jump into the actual workshop, just a final word on the toolkit itself. You know, the toolkit doesn't have all the answers. What it does do is it helps us all to ask the right questions, and I think that's an important definition to say. You know, we think it's a kind of roadmap for us that helps us to make sure that we're presenting imagery that's more authentic and a better depiction of people in advertising, marketing and communications. At this point, I'm going to hand over to Rebecca.
Thank you. Let's go to the next slide. So one of the issues with talking about diversity, equity, inclusion when it comes to imagery is where the hell to start. And we've been having these conversations internally for a number of years now. We're very, very aware that the customers we're working with are trying to solve these problems in their own brand marketing. And the really cool thing about this kit, as Peter said, is that Citi are, that they could have kept this all to themselves, all of this research and all of this work, but actually they've made it open source, so anybody can use it. And the idea is to start unpicking this issue. And, it's very obvious, we're standing here as two middle-aged, I'm speaking for myself here, two middle-aged white people, and these DE&I stories tend to be the responsibility, or they end up being the responsibility of people who have traditionally been underrepresented. And what we're trying to do is change that conversation and actually make it everybody's responsibility. So we've made it, I like to think, simpler than just talking about diversity as this massive amorphous thing. And we've broken it down into 7 identities in some countries, but in the UK we've included the 8th, which is socioeconomic status, because it's really important to think about how we are representing different classes in our advertising and our marketing imagery. So this is just an insight into what the thing actually looks like, and we've done this, as I say, for each of the 8 identities. This example here is age, and what we have done is we've looked at the demographic and psychographic landscape of each market. So this is obviously the UK population up the top there. We've then compared it to the visuals that are seen in that country. Now, the great thing about being Getty Images is that we have an insight into millions and millions of image usage in the UK. So what we've done is we've mapped our data over the demographic data that's available for this country. And by doing that, we can then look at where the gaps are, who's being underrepresented, who's been stereotyped, and who's been forgotten about completely. And then we've created a list of areas of opportunity. So, as a brand, if you're thinking about building equity around a certain identity group, this is a shortcut to where you might put your resources, when you're creating visuals. And then at the end of each section, we've actually got these questions that you can ask yourself, and I'll share some of those as we go through. So we're going to look at race and ethnicity, disability and gender here today, and it's going to be a bit of a whistle-stop tour because we've only got half an hour. But the idea is that we will show you some of the insights that we have developed out of the research that we've been doing. We will highlight the questions that we ask ourselves and that we encourage our customers to ask. And then finally, we're going to look at some images. And the good thing about these images is there's no right or wrong answer. This is not going to be a exercise in shaming people for choosing the wrong image. It's going to highlight some of the issues around choosing the right image or making informed choices about images. So we'll move on to race and ethnicity. We've called it race and ethnicity because some countries do define race and ethnicity separately. In the UK, we only talk about ethnic groups. And this is a quick snapshot of what the UK looks like. The white people dominate the UK. It's the largest ethnic group. But the second largest ethnic group, and I want you to hold this in your mind, collectively are South Asians, Indian, Bangladeshi and Pakistani. Now, we're all waiting with bated breath, or some of us are, for the 2021 census data to be published, and maybe we'll see a change in the demographic mix of the UK. But right now, this is what the official statistics say we are. Now, weirdly, even though we don't talk about race in the UK specifically, we do talk about mixed race. And that is for anyone who comes from different ethnic groups and is not one specific ethnic group. So you'll see that peppered throughout, even though it's not necessarily a term that some countries like to use. In terms of what the visual landscape looks like, so what does marketing and advertising look like? Again, you have white ethnic group is dominating the visual landscape. Next up, interestingly, is black ethnic groups. And bear in mind that we did this research off the back of the Black Lives Matter movement of summer 2020, and there was almost a kind of redirection for many brands to over-index on black people in their advertising. Now, I would also argue that we should be representing people who are not white in our advertising and marketing more than we have in the past, and therefore we hope that this number will continue to climb. But interestingly, the Asian number is incredibly small. And again, I refer you back to the Indian, Bangladeshi and Pakistani people. 15% of people from those ethnic groups are in the highest socioeconomic group in the UK. But in advertising, we see them less than 2% of the time. So in terms of kind of, thinking about equality and equity, that would be a great place to start. When we see 3-generation families in advertising, they're overwhelmingly white, with only 10% which are black and mixed race. And when we see mixed race families, they always show black and white parents. Again, so that's very much a very, very narrow view of what mixed race is here in the UK. And then, when we look at the world of work, we see groups of people working. They are always multi-ethnic, multicultural. And in fact, small business representation, so small, how small business is represented in the media is actually the most diverse here in the UK. But when we get to corporate business, we see that 80% of business leaders are white, 10% black, and then 10% from the South Asian ethnic group. And then the poor old Indian community, 45% of content of them that we see at all in the UK shows them at work, which is not a very broad or very aspirational way of depicting our second largest ethnic group in the UK. So these are some of the questions that we ask ourselves when we are when we're thinking about race and ethnicity in particular. Are you tokenizing or are you humanizing? And I'll go back to the groups of people working in corporate business. They do tend to be multicultural, multi-ethnic. Are they tokenistic? Are we just putting people together in photo shoots or choosing images which have people who represent the diversity of the UK population? Or are we humanizing everybody that we're representing? Are we representing people in a way that breaks or diminishes stereotypes? And this is really important when it comes to racial stereotypes and ethnic stereotypes. I love this image in particular, and I tend to put it in a lot of my presentations because you so rarely see two men having a moment of affection and intimacy. And also they are men of colour, which is, again, you see even less of that type of imagery. And when we are representing people who are not from the same ethnic group as ourselves, are we favouring skin tones and hairstyles and hair textures? Are we, are we looking for people who have a skin tone that is closer to our own? And that's really, really important, especially when it comes to representing the black population. Are we thinking about how they might have been discriminated in the past, and are we therefore making sure that we show the diverse range of skin colour in the content that we're creating? So I'm going to move on to the first visual exercise. So get your phones ready. We're going to have to look at some images. And we're going to hopefully get the results up on the stage. So when it comes to Indian people, and that's kind of where I've focused this section on, which of these images do you think is the most successful at inclusively representing Indian people? Like I say, please give it a go. There is no right or wrong answer for this, and we'll give you a couple of minutes to have a go at that, and then hopefully the results will come up on the screen. and we can see who has voted. Which one would you choose, Peter?
You know, I think I probably agree with the audience here. I mean, I think especially the two on the right, are particularly authentic, I think, in the way they're shot. And I particularly like the representation, or it's changing.
Which are you talking about? The pregnant lady?
Yes, exactly.
And
in the middle.
The one in the middle. Yeah. I think, you know, pregnancy is something that tends to be very white. We see a lot of white women in pregnancy in this country. And it's really great to see an Indian woman who is, she's in a prenatal exercise class. I hope I haven't just influenced the results there. They've suddenly gone up to 56%. The reason I put A in is because, again, you know, senior representation is woefully underrepresented, inaccurate, inauthentic, and to see a South Asian couple in that kind of classic senior pose is quite a rare thing. So that, again, although it's a classic kind of advertising shot, I think it's a good one. And then the one in the middle, I just love her because she's so funky and cool, and she's hugging a guinea pig, and it's just really cool that she's not, you know, she's dyed her hair, you know, and she's got tattoos, and it's such a rare depiction of somebody who is Indian ethnicity. So I think we have a clear winner there. The woman who is pregnant has won that particular one at 58.8%, and I can quite rightly say that is I think that's a good choice by you all. So you know what to expect now when we get to the next one. All right, disability. This is a particular bugbear of mine because it's really, really important to think about disability as part of inclusive practice. Disability, out of all identities, seems to be the one that gets most forgotten. And as we've been through these toolkits with Citi, it's the one that is least represented in every country that we've looked at. So there's so much work to be done there. And the key thing about disability is that 21% of the UK population have a disability, and it's more women than men, and more people as they get old. Oh dear, we've had a little bit of had a little bug there. As we get older, we also pick up disabilities. So more people in the older age groups have disabilities in the UK. And also 48% of the population have a mobility issue. So that means that 52% of people with disabilities have no mobility issues. And again, bear that in mind as we go on to the next slide. So here, when we look at the visual landscape, you'll see that 3 times as many images show people with physical disabilities, i.e. mobility issues, than non-physical disabilities. The majority of people who are seen living with disabilities tend to be white again. And when it comes to who is represented, gosh, I don't know what's happened to this slide. When it comes to who is represented, it's very much indexed towards young people. And if you bear in mind what we saw on the previous slide, is much more old people are living with disabilities than young people. And then the poor old kids at school, if a child has a disability, they tend to be the only kid that is represented in a group of non-disabled kids. So we very rarely show images of kids with disabilities as a community, as having, you know, friendships, etc. So I think there's a lot of work to be done there as well. And in terms of asking the questions, we've done a lot of work at Getty Images with the NDLA, which is an umbrella organisation in the US, and they've been very good at helping us really understand the issues of the stereotyping around disability. One of them is focusing on the person's whole identity and not kind of prioritising their disability. Some people are very proud and you know and will talk about their disability you know, at the front of their kind of identity, but for most people, it's a part of who they are. And I think that's really key. This lady here is a teacher, and she just happens to be a wheelchair user. Next up, are we representing multiple intersections of identity? And when we get into intersectionality, it gets way more complicated. It's like, you know, those 8 identities I showed you, there's a kind of matrix that goes across all of them. But I think specifically with disability, as I say, that does tend to be represented as white people. You know, are we thinking about disability plus? Are we thinking about, you know, as in this instance, this is a real mixed race family who has a daughter who is on the autistic spectrum. Are we showing all experiences that people with disabilities have? So, you know, not just focusing in on the struggle or the you know, superhuman strengths that they might have as an athlete, as we see in Paralympic representation, but actually, you know, the day-to-day. And that was the one thing that we've had, you know, in terms of feedback around the imagery that we're creating. Just focus in on the day-to-day. There's a couple here at a street market here in London. The man in the image here is visually impaired. And then very importantly, and this is something that we have very much taken on board, and for anyone who's creating content themselves, is, you know, what is the camera angle you're using? Are you at the same level of somebody who might be a little person or might be using a wheelchair, or are you looking down on them? And you know, and what is the power dynamic that you therefore create when you're not thinking about camera angles? So on to the next one. Okay, disability. Which image is most successful at inclusively representing a person with a disability? Again, no right or wrong answers here. Please cast your votes, A, B or C. Peter, which one do you like?
I feel like I shouldn't say yet. I feel like we need to give it a
chance.
chance.
Oh yeah, give it a chance. So we'll see what the scores come up with, shall we? Oh, interesting. This is...
I'm going to say that again. I actually find the image on the right of the mother in the wheelchair appealing. I think partly because of, you say, the intersectionality of the ethnicity. I think that the idea of people with disability as mothers, I think, is fantastic to see. So you know, and you talk about that, the idea of living with disability. I mean, there's no better example of living with the disability than that.
Exactly. And such a rare image to see. It really stopped me in my tracks actually when I saw it, because I hadn't seen anything like that before. So I thought that was a great example of exactly what we're trying to get to with the images. A is a great example of showing somebody who has a disability who works in an office and is you know, going about their, again, daily life, working in a call centre. And the second one is a woman with a disability who is she's in a yoga class, and she's taking part in the class with a group of other students. So again, I think depending on what you're trying to do with a representation of disability, you know, are you trying to encourage more people with disabilities to apply for a job? Are you you know, thinking about the the life stages of the people of the UK, plus, you know, including those people who have disabilities, or are you creating you know, something that's actually about mental well-being, but she just happens to have a physical disability? So great. And then last but not least is gender. This is a big hot topic and something that I've been working on for many years. You know, I think the conversation around the representation of women in advertising especially is near on 50 years old now, and we're still having it, and we still haven't solved it. But we also need to think about the representation of all genders, and that's where we're starting to get to with this work. So lovely binary pie chart here, mainly because until this year, or sorry, last year, the UK census would only give you the option of male or female. Hopefully that's going to change when, as I say, when the census, I make it sound like I'm very excited about the census results. The census results are being published in September this year. And so, you know, this is what we're dealing with the demographic information. But when you have a look at the toolkit, you'll notice that we have included transgender representation in gender, because when we talk about LGBT plus, the transgender gender expression tends to get lumped in with sexual orientation expression, and so we have extracted that out, although there is also transgender in the LGBT sexual orientation section. Sounds very confusing, but it makes sense. And when we look at the visual landscape, women are represented more than men. I think we all knew that. But the data point that I particularly focusing in on is that it's pretty proportional for every age group, except when it comes to 20 to 29-year-old women, where there's twice as many women represented as men. And I'm just going to leave that there for everybody to consider as to why that might be. We see more men still as business leaders, despite all of the work that's been done, despite all of the conversations that we've been having. And women are 30% more likely to be featured with a baby than a man. Again, I think that is a step forward, but there's still work to be done there. Still, non-binary and transgender representation and all the other gender representations are negligible. So, despite the fact that we don't have the data, we also don't have the visual data to match that too. So, lots of work to be done there too. So when it comes to gender, and again, I feel this feels like such a simple thing, you know, are we considering images that help counter gender reinforcing stereotypes? I'd like to think that we all do that, but it's quite interesting. Again, you know, there's been some great research as to, you know, how consumers especially will be biased towards certain content when asked questions around job roles, and go down the kind of very, very traditional route. This is the type of work that we're trying to do now to try and combat that, the gender stereotypes. This is one that I'm kind of looking at right now, is thinking about gender identity that's less seen. Now, we have a glorious man here with no hair on his head. He's bald. I don't know if you know this or not, but the UK has the most number of bald men, well, 0.001% less than France. France has the most bald men in the world, and the UK has a huge number. 39.23% of men in the UK are bald. When you look at the images, 1% of advertising marketing features bald men. So lots of work to do there. I'd also like a shout out for women with short hair. Never see them, underrepresented. I don't think I'm the only person. Actually, I might be here with short hair. Yeah, that's my own campaign on gender representation. Are we thinking about people of all gender identities and gender expression? And are we including, you know, LGBTQ plus here, and you know, expanding out the spectrum of gender representation? When it comes to kids, are we focusing on the stereotypes which is related to their perceived gender? Anyone who has kids will know that, you know, there's a blue section and there's a pink section in toy stores and in clothing stores, and you know, some of it is nature and some of it is nurture. But how are we as marketers, how are we as advertisers changing that and shifting it so that it's a little bit more representative? And then, you know, have we thought about layers of identity? Again, this is intersection, but intersection as it pertains to gender. 80% of content that features people who are Muslim are images of young women. And, you know, there's a lot, again, there's a lot to unpack there. So, you know, we need to be representing Muslim men. This is a fabulous image of a Muslim father with his son. Don't see this a whole lot. You know, there's a lot of work that we still have to do in this area as well. Last quiz now. We're going to look at gender. Which image is the most successful at inclusively representing gender? This is your last chance to shine, folks. What do you reckon, Peter?
I think this is a tough one. I think they're great, all of them. Yeah, you know, I wouldn't. Dead heat for me.
All three of them?
Yeah.
That's a very politically correct
I guess.
response there. Our ladies exercising are not popular. Our gay parents with their son is doing very well, and our younger non-binary people are doing well as well. I think this one's quite a tricky one. Gender's such a big subject to unpick, and as I say, it is in some ways it is intertwined with other areas of identity. And, you know, we find, for example, with the representation of the LGBT community, which is a whole other section in the toolkit, is that it's very heavily weighted towards gay men and gay fathers. We see lesbian mothers less represented, and then we see less, you know, people of colour within that intersection of identity as well. Love the image on the right. See, it's a great example of the kind of Gen Z generation. You know, there's a lot of talk about talking to this generation, and just the style of the image very much works. And love what they're wearing. Love the hairstyles. Both got short hair. No bias on my part there in terms of choosing that image. And interestingly, although A wasn't very popular with you, I think you know, there's a lot of work still to be done around body shape, especially in gender expression, especially when it comes to women's bodies. And you know, we do have another section that's on body type in the toolkit, but I think, you know, choosing images when you're talking about women, not necessarily talking about exercise and losing weight and being fit and healthy and taking care of yourself, but actually just talking about, you know, women and lifestyles, is to think, you know, across some of these other identities as well. So that's the reason why I put that image in there. Plus, I really, really like it. So, you know, that's it in terms of the whistle-stop tour along the surface of 3 identities out of the 8. I'm going to hand you back to Peter, who's going to give you a quick snapshot of what everything else looks like before we love you and leave you.
That's great. Thanks, Rebecca. Okay, as I mentioned at the beginning, coming soon is the additional toolkits, and as I mentioned as well, if we can, not that QR code, the next QR code, if you can have a look at that or have a look at the link, I think that so they'll all be available to you throughout this year. So please do take the time to have a look at them, download them. I mean, look, thanks for us. That's it. Thank you for attending. You know, we hope that you find these insights useful and that you're able to use them to be more inclusive and represent diversity within the images that you use in your work. Just from a Citi perspective, obviously we've been sitting with this for a little while now, and what I've certainly experienced and noticed inside is that we're asking the right questions a lot more when it comes to what we're looking at within imagery, and certainly when it comes to critique of work, you know, we're really thinking about this much more. So we've found it incredibly helpful. I think that's it. I'm not sure. Do we have time for questions?
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions they wanted to ask quickly? Yes. Hello.
Hiya. Thank you. With disability, I mean, obviously a lot of disabilities are not seen, and I think a lot of times you just see people reverting to someone in a wheelchair, and it's kind of lazy, but it is quite challenging to represent disability in different ways. I wondered if you had kind of thoughts on how with imagery you can be a bit more diverse in the way you show.
Sure. Do you want me to take that?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
So the key thing, and then again, this is part of the learning that we've had over the last 3 years, is the key thing is to use people who actually have that disability, and that seems so incredibly obvious, but it has not been the history of image creation. And then to speak to work with the person as you're shooting them, because there'll be certain body language, or there might be the way they hold themselves, or there might be the way that they interact with other people. I've learned so much about really small nuances of body language through this experience, and I think if you're somebody who has that disability as well, you will notice it and you will feel seen. And I think that's the really important thing, is to understand that it's not a broad brushstroke with somebody in a wheelchair. It's really obvious. The other thing is, people with prosthetics. You see a lot of people with prosthetics. And actually thinking about neurodiversity and intellectual disabilities and and even physical disabilities that are not seen. I think it's been a long kind of evolution for us, but now I can actually pick up on those cues as well, and that's what we should be doing. It's hard. We should be doing the hard stuff, and to move everything forward.
Any other questions? You've been so comprehensive.
Yeah, I'm surprised.
Yeah,
There is so much more. There's so much more to tell. There's so much more to share. I feel like I've done you a disservice by only sharing half an hour. Hello.
Hi. What are your cues for authentic representation versus greenwashing?
Greenwashing.
Yeah.
Oh, we're bringing sustainability into it, are we?
No, but in terms of kind of representing disability for the sake of, or diversity for the sake of it, rather than authentically having it.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a difficult one. I think that's between you and your own moral compass. I mean, I can't say that I have asked myself these questions through the 20 plus years I've been in this industry, but I certainly ask those questions now. And I think it's a kind of the evolution of image creation and the evolution of how we talk about our brands to the world, is that we need to bring more of this thinking into the work we do. Because the thing is, making images is dead easy. It used to be really hard when I first started, and you had this kind of, you were seen as magicians and you were creating all these beautiful images. Now everybody can do it. Our kids can do it. So you've got to do something difficult, and that's to ask questions about how you're creating the images, how the images are created that you're using as well. Yeah.
And I think that what we've found, certainly from the point of view of having that demographic information there, it helps. It's just a mental reminder of the fact that we've got to at least be considering this. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's quite interesting how you can get distracted by some areas of identity, and then others are forgotten. And really, at any time, it's a brand decision. Which identities are you going to think equitably about? Which identities are you going to think about kind of, making sure that you treat everybody equally? And how are you going to expand the representation of people? Yeah.
That's great.
It's a lot of work.
Indeed. Well, I think we're at time. So, Rebecca, thank you for sharing the stage with me.
Thank you, Peter.
I hope they found that
Pleasure.
useful. Thank you.
Thank you.